Okay, so this is going to be an intro to Maya, and I am not an awesome artist by any stretch of the imagination, but sometimes you got to create stuff to put in a game or something like that that's a placeholder while somebody who is an awesome artist is actually doing cool stuff. So this is going to serve as a real basic intro to it, and maybe if you are a super awesome artist, you can take what I'm showing you here and just run with it. And if you're not a super awesome artist, but you need some placeholder graphics in your game, or you just need something, maybe this will be a way to get you going too. So I'm not an expert in Maya. So if you're watching this and you're critiquing every little thing that I'm doing, I'm probably going to do a lot of stuff wrong. Or maybe there's better ways to do that. If there's better ways to do some of this stuff, feel free to put some comments um, in YouTube, just so that people have a better idea of what's going on. But I am going to show you what works for me and what I know how to do, and hopefully try to clear up any kind of ambiguity that you may have or concerns you may have about using Maya. Just because you've never used it before. So when you first open it up, you're going to get this view here, which is a perspective view of our scene that we're going to build. And what we're going to build right now, we're just going to build a guy. We're going to build a guy that we can dump into our Uni project. And he's not going to have any animations. We'll do that later. But he's just going to be basically a nice looking stick figure. And hopefully by doing that, we'll be able to see some of these tools and know a little bit more about how they work, and that should get you going. So anyways, here we have this thing. If I hit the space bar, this is like one big scene of our perspective view. If I hit the space bar, now we have our perspective, our top, our front, and our side. And you can notice down here that this guy and this guy have grid marks. These two, the front and the side, don't have grid marks. Right underneath where it says lighting, you can click on this thing here. I'll just hover my mouse over it. It says grid. You can put them on. And grid. And there you go. So this thing can toggle the grid on and off. Really doesn't affect what you're drawing, but it may help you see things a little bit better. And so yeah, that's what we got going on here. Now, what I want to do is I'm going to put in. I have a little sketch. I just found it on Google Images. I didn't make it myself. I probably don't have the rights to it, but it's an image that has a front view and a side view. And what I want to do is stick the front view here and the side view here, and we're going to use those to actually build a 3D model. So we're going to use that picture as a reference and make something sort of similar to it. So I am going to go to View and say Image Plane, Import Image, and I have a front.png, which is this guy here. And I am going to scale him up a little bit because he's a little bit small, so I will change his so yeah, once I brought him in with him selected, now we've got over here on the right the properties of this thing, and I am going to just double the width and height just because it makes it a little bit easier to work with. So his width will be 10 and his height will be 9. And now he's big and gigantic. And notice here in the front we see him like this, and in the side view it's 1 pixel wide essentially, or 0 pixels wide, however you want to look at it, because this is how it is in the 3D plane. And if the camera was sort of looking in at it this way, we would just sort of see a slice of paper, and that's what this thing is. So I want to try to center this thing, and we're going to start drawing like right here in the middle. So what I want to do is I want to get this piece of it here in our grid sort of out of the way, like throw it way in the back, like maybe if it was way back here, that would be better. And then I also want to make this thing sort of be centered with our crosshairs here, because we'll also bring in the side view and have it centered within this these crosshairs here. And so it'll make it a lot easier to draw. So to throw this thing in the back, we can change the z-axis. So we have x going this way, y going up and down, and then z going back and forth. So if I just set z to, like, let's say -20, he's going to get thrown way in the back. And this didn't change at all, but he got thrown way in the back, which is good because this leaves this little area here empty for us to make our model. And that'll become important in a little bit. But we still have, this guy is not in the right spot, and we need to move him. So if I select him like this, and I hit the W key, so I am hitting the W key, and with him selected, I hit W, and now I've got all these different arrows and things like that, and I can move him. So I can just click, left click, and drag, and I can move him over like this and kind of line him up in the middle. That's all that. That's all that I was doing. So again, I had to select him in this top one, and then hit the W key to get these arrows, and then I was able to move them. And then we'll do the same thing over here. In our side view, we'll say image plane, import image. I call this profile. And we were going to double his size, 10, 9. And so, the same kind of thing is happening where it's not exactly centered just because the PNG that I ripped this from had both of these guys in the same side. And so I just, copied only half of it and made a new one. And so it had this gigantic rectangle, which is why we have to adjust these centers, but that's okay. So I can, since I've already got this thing selected and I've already hit W, I can just bring him in and sort of line him up in the middle like that. And then we also need to throw him in the back so that it's not in the middle here where we're going to be modeling things. And this is the x-axis here, so I'll just make that a -20. And there he goes. So we've got our reference views, and they're all lined up and ready for us to go. What we can do is we can put these guys on a separate layer. That way we can show and hide just these guys. So over here, if you've used Photoshop before, you're probably familiar with how layers work. So I can click on a new layer, and it already assigned this guy because I've got it selected. So I can go back up here in the top and I can select the other one, and then I can right click on my layer one and say add selected objects. And now they're both on it. And this little box here I can change to an R, which means that's a reference image. So, so now we've got our reference images all set and ready to go, and we can start putting in our models. And really, all we're going to do is draw a couple rectangles or a couple cubes, and then shape it. And that's really it. And we're not going to get into all kinds of details. I think you'll kind of start to see the process of how it's all working, and then you can get into the nitty gritty of all the details whenever you want to. So so we're going to add a cube. So up here we have all of our shapes. We'll just add a cube, and it says draw it on the grid. So I'll just draw something. So I left clicked, and then now it wants me to left click again and actually draw this thing. All right, so we drew a box. This is going to be the guy's head, and so we need to position it a little bit. Now, there's a couple things we can do in this scene here. We can use the 4 and 5 keys. So if I push 4, it becomes a wireframe, and 5, it becomes this solid cube. And it all depends on which panel your mouse is over. So if I move my mouse down here to the lower right, I can hit 4 and 5 and show and hide this thing. And then if I'm over here, 4 and 5. But we sort of want something that's in between. Like this little green box is kind of hard to see. This hides too much stuff. So what we can do is with the 5 key press, so that this is a solid rectangle, we can go to let's see, where's it at? Shading, and go down to X-ray. And so now it's sort of I'll go over this one and hit 4. So this has some shading to it, so we can kind of see it a little bit easier. But it's also transparent as well. So in this view, I'm going to do the same thing. I'll go to shading and say X-ray. And again, this is not really changing what we're actually drawing or modeling, but it's changing how we see it in these particular views. See, so this guy still doesn't have X-ray on, and neither does this one. And so that just allows us to better position and align these things. So we've got W selected, which is going to allow us to position this thing. And I'm just going to go through all of our different views and position it. I'll position it over this way. And now it's kind of in a line with his head, but it's a little bit small. So if I hit R, then we can start to scale this thing up and make it a little bit taller. maybe a little bit wider, and let's make it just a little bit taller, get down to the bottom of his chin. Oops, too much. And I'll hit W again and just move this down a bunch, or a little bit. And so now we have our cube here that is going around this guy's head. And yeah, it's not perfect, right? It's part of his hat is sticking out. His chin down here is, is he doesn't have a block head, but we'll work on that in a sec. If I hold down Command, so I'm on a Mac, it's probably different on Windows, but if I hold down Command and I left click, I can rotate things around, and I can zoom in and sort of see that this cube is lining up with his head in these different perspectives. So I've got Command pressed and I'm left clicking to get into this rotation thing. And then to zoom in and out, I'm just using the scroll wheel. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to give a little bit of shape to this guy's head. We're not going to go crazy with it, but we'll give a little bit of shape. And what we need to do is sort of break this this head into different segments, and that way we can position the different segments of his head. And we do this with a thing called the edge loop tool. And so this thing says split selected edge ring. And maybe you don't have this tool up in your toolbar. And if you don't, go to Mesh Tools and Insert Edge Loop Tool is what you want. And if you have this thing highlighted and you hit Control Shift, you click on it and then press Control Shift and then release the mouse button, it'll dump it to your shortcut menu and have it here. And that's a good idea to have it up in this little shortcut menu because we're going to be clicking on it quite a bit. And so it's easier to just go up here and click on it than it is to always go in here. So that's how you get this thing, this edge loop tool inside of your toolbar here. So I will click on this and it says just click on it where you want to put it. And we'll just insert a couple of them like this. And I don't know, that looks good. And you can break them into vertical segments, horizontal segments, however you want to do it. It doesn't matter. Just start, inserting these things. And that's going to allow us to individually scale and position certain pieces of this thing. So if I go get my little arrow tool and I can select this, and then now I have my W to position, so I can move this if I wanted to, like move his chin way out there. It's not what I wanted to do, so I'll undo that. But with R, I can scale it down. And so now we're scaling down his chin, and it starts to go there. And then over on this side, so that was from my front perspective, and now over here I can scale it down some more, like this. And I can go back to W and move it forward. And then R, scale it down, W, move it forward. All right, so we've got our two views. We've sort of made a chin. Now, this thing jumps up and it's this angle that doesn't look right. Well, keep adding edge loops and make it more correct as you want to get it. We're going to get this thing just sort of roughed in here. I'm going to select up here, and we'll do the same thing. R, scale it in, W, so move it back. And we could put more edge loops in here to try to smooth this thing out. Then, but I think this is really all that I wanted to do. Oops, hit R again. Maybe scale it in up at the top like this. And there you go. That'll be close enough. That makes us a nice head. Okay, so from this perspective, we see his chin kind of sticking out. And from this perspective, we see his chin sort of coming down. And, we've got our divisions up here where we're going to eventually we can put in the detail for his eyes and nose and things like that. But for right now, it's, it's sort of just this little blocky head-looking thing, which is perfectly fine. So yeah, that gives us our head. Now we'll add a body. So to add a body, I'm just going to go click on our cube tool over there and just do something similar. Pull it up just to get something drawn. And then I'm going to come over down to these perspectives down here and align it to the right spot. So I'll hit W, which we can move over here, and then align it this way. And then I will hit R to scale it like this. And we'll we'll scale it in. We're trying to, shape out his body, so maybe I went too big on this one. And we'll just keep doing this. Then we hit W to position it. Pretty big, so R. We don't need his legs. We'll put those in later. W. And then over here we can R, scale it down like this. Just move it over a little bit. So now we've got a body. And, we can start putting in edge loops if we wanted to sort of bring it around these curves. But for now, he's just going to have a block body. And if we go over here in this upper pane, and I'm hitting Command again and left clicking so I can move this thing around and zoom in on it, we see that, all right, we've got his neck and his body. They're not really connected to each other, but that's okay. We are going to fix that. Right now we're going to connect the two of them. All right, so we need to connect these two things. What we're going to do now. So what I want to do is I want to make sure that we select the two objects, and this is where sometimes things get a little funky for me, where the tools don't exactly work correctly for me. Sometimes when you right click, you can get, there you go, you get all these options, and sometimes they show up and sometimes they don't, and maybe someday I'll figure out when they do, but I just keep right clicking around until I get it right. And this will allow us to select an individual face, which is just like one of these segments, like an entire segment. Edge is just one line. Object allows us to select the whole thing, and this is what I want to do. So right now I'm holding down the right click button and spinning around like this. No. And hey, oops. What I want to do is go to object mode. And in object mode, I can select all of these things, and I have two objects selected, right? We have our head and our body, so I want to select them both. And then I can go to mesh up here and say combine. And now we've got one object. So now when I select the top, the bottom one gets selected as well. And that's, saying we've got one object here. We do need to connect these two things. And so in order to do that, we need to go to face mode. So I right clicked and went to face. And we need to delete the bottom piece of our neck and then the top piece of our body. So when I click on it, it becomes green, and then I just hit the delete button. And so now it's kind of like we've got a hole on either side of these things that we need to connect. And with that, we will go to Mesh Tools and Append to Polygon tool. And now I'm going to go over here in my perspective view, and I'm going to click on one of these sides, and all these purple things show up. And so I clicked on the top, and then I'm going to click down here on the bottom, and it's going to draw in this little polygon tool. And then I'll hit G for good. And then I'm going to spin this thing around and do it again. Click up here, down here, and hit G for good. And same thing again, click, G for good, and then we'll do the last one. Click, G for good. And now everything is all connected. And we've got our neck and our body, and yeah, it's a little wonky, but that's all right. So here we go. So we're starting to frame this guy in. You can see how it's sort of following what our sketch looks like. And you can use any kind of sketch of anything that has a side view and a front view, and just start boxing this stuff in. And the more, like we said, the more edge loops you have, the better you can make it, more accurate you can make it look. All right, so here's his body. We need to make some legs. And in order to do that, I am going to split this thing. So with the edge loop tool, I will just kind of click here, which splits them right down the middle. And I'm also going to split it here. Oops. Undo that. Also going to split it just right by his waist, like that sort of thing. So now we've got these two stubs here that we can use for his legs. And actually, I'm also going to do another split just to the left, and then just to the right of center. So, so here we have these two things for his legs, and then this little piece will stay there once we get going here. All right, so what we need to do is we need to select this face, and then pull them down and move them over, and that's how we're going to create our legs. So make sure, right-click, and make sure you have face selected. And then with our arrow tool, we can click on one face. And then up here is extrude. Extrude the selected component. And so that's what I want to click on, extrude. And let's see what happens when we just pull it down. There we go. And then I want to go to W, and we can move it over. And then we can hit R to scale it. We've done before. And there we have one leg. So I can go back to this thing. I can click on that face. We click on our extrude tool, and we do the same thing again. We bring it down, this, and we bring it over like that. And we're done. And so now we have our head, our body, and our legs. Later on, we can maybe make him walk around. But before we're done with this thing, and if we just go to, if I right click and go into object mode, now you can sort of see what our model is starting to look like here. So we're giving some life to him. Still looks a little strange, right? Missing all sorts of details, but we're just doing the basics of Maya, and we're also just doing maybe some potential placeholder stuff. That way, somebody else can finish it all off. But anyways, this is just how we're doing things. All right, so we have this. Let's put in some arms, and so I'm going to click on our edge loop tool again, like this, and then we're just going to do exactly the same thing we did for our legs. So let's go to face, right click, face, oops, and get our pointer, click on that, and then we will go to extrude. Let's just extrude it like this. All right, we can do something like this. That was a little far. How about that? Whoa. Let's see. And there he goes. Something like this. And we can work on the whole scaling of this thing. This is a little bit off, but that's all right. And then we'll go around to the other side, do the same thing. Click on this, click on this. Let's go to extrude. We'll just pull it this way, and now he's got some arms going on. And this guy is a little bit crazy, but we can clean it up, right? We can go over here, and we can say with our R, scale it like this. And you can even select just the edges of this thing. Maybe we can hit R there and scale the hands back. Like that. Right, so, and then we could position this arm however we want. Yeah, his arms are gigantic, but that's okay. So we have, in here, the arms are hanging down. I just made them straight out, sort of. But then if we go to object mode like this, here's our guy. He's starting to take shape, our little stick figure guy. And now we can export him into Unity and throw him in there, and he becomes, sort of our placeholder guy. So here is a stick figure that we drew in Maya. And let's see, what did we do? We joined objects. We started with cubes. We made edge lines and shaped individual pieces of it, extruded, and that's it. And so that's how you do this stuff. And you just keep doing it more and more and more to get your detail that you want to get. So that's an intro to Maya.